Welcome to part one of a special two-part conversation on what no one told us. Today, Lloyd brings something real to the table: the quiet battle between feeling enough and craving external validation. Through powerful metaphors and honest storytelling, Lloyd and Diego dive into the roots of these noisy neighborhoods, early conditioning, school ranking systems, success tied to self-worth, and open a pathway for moving forward with acceptance, courage, and connection. If you've ever questioned whether you're enough without applause, this conversation will feel like a deep exhale. Tune in, breathe, and join the exploration.
Hey Diego, how you doing?
Hello.
Welcome back.
Yeah, welcome to the morning sessions.
Good to see you again.
What's
So,
happening, Mike?
how are you? How are you doing?
I'm very good, very good, very good. Had a week. Last week, I slept like 6 nights of the 7 nights in my car, and and one night in a little room in the house because the tent was like blowing, and so. But all of that, I slept in the car voluntarily. I wasn't, I wasn't like fired for any space or anything. But yeah, 3 nights up in Lee and 3 nights in a festival. They are very close to where you are in the Kaimais. They're close to McLaren Falls. It was beautiful. And yeah, and yeah, experiencing the wet weather, sleeping in the car. Yeah, that was beautiful. How you doing, Lloyd?
Yeah, I'm mostly good, mostly good. Actually, this morning I felt this a little bit of I call it like frustration, I think, I was with this feeling this morning of frustration, and I wasn't really sure kind of what was going on with that. So I was just exploring this feeling of frustration a little bit, and it was kind of centered around, I think, the podcast, funnily enough. Um, and the frustration was this feeling of like, um, where are we going with this? And I was, I think, feeling like I was needing to find out how the message or how the podcast was being received by others. And because it's such early stages, it's really hard to know whether any of this is landing with anybody. And I was feeling a bit frustrated with it this morning, and I was like, well, I got to show up for this podcast today, and maybe this would be an interesting topic to talk about, this frustration or this, I think, need for external feedback or external validation from others to sort of say, yeah, you're on the right track. This is valuable, or this is you're doing a good job. So, and then there was a part of me that was kind of feeling a bit like ashamed of that too, like, oh, needing external validation. That kind of is a bit ugly, you know? Um, and as I sat with that a little bit more and explored it, I was thinking to myself, well, what is this all about? This external validation. And it's kind of like the noisy neighbor, you know, this noisy neighbor that shows up and kind of, it's a part like it's a part of me that I don't want to necessarily identify with, but I can't kind of just get rid of either. Do you know what I mean? Almost like the annoying neighbor next door. You kind of stuck with it. And it shows up from time to time. And I think it's showed up this morning, this noisy neighbor. And I guess I'm conscious of not wanting to identify with it, but also how do I move forward in a way where I can just be, you know, more accepting of being enough, you know, just being enough as it is without needing this external validation. And where does this come from? You know, where does this external validation or need to feel like we're on the right track or doing a good job or adding value in terms of a sense of achievement? Well, yeah, I think that's important, but I don't want that to be a defining part of the process. So, and again, in the spirit of being vulnerable and open and authentic in these discussions, I wondered if there were other people out there that were experiencing something similar. Maybe it's a topic that we could explore. Have you ever experienced something like that in yourself? And what does that look like?
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's
Mm.
where I'm at today.
Without this being a therapy session or something, but or something like that, I would like to ask you when you say external validation, what what does what does external validation looks like? Is it like what it would be something that you hear from the exterior that would makes you feel that this podcast is going well? Is it like one person telling you that it's going well? Listening to social media, somebody writing or reading a great review about this? Or how does it look like? What's external validation?
Yeah, I think it's yeah, the opinion of others or yeah, it could be a comment or it could be likes or followers, it could be more tangible things, right? So when I say tangible things that I can actually see and measure.
What if I tell you something like I listen to this podcast every time an episode goes launched, and I listen it in the car, and I put myself in a listening position without I'm listening to myself, of course, and to you, and I know you, and I really like the podcast. I really like all the imperfections. I really like everything that's happening. It's not that I like it because we made it. I like it because it is here and it has is raw and it has the essence that that we created, and I can feel it. So my question here is that if I tell you that, does it count as an external validation?
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Uh,
Um,
does it make you feel different, or you still? Because what I'm saying is that external validation need goes on and on regardless how much validation you get. Or
maybe.
it gets a point where you said, okay, I got enough validation. I'm doing a good job.
Yeah, maybe. And this is not the first experience I've noticed this. We call it the noisy neighbor, shall we? Um, that I've noticed this noisy neighbor of myself. Um, it's not the first time, and it probably won't be the last time. The difference now is that I can notice it and I can catch it. Like I said, like reflecting this morning, um, noticing the sense of this frustration or what was going on and trying to piece that together and explore that a little bit more. Um, I don't know if that's going to be something that I will have to put up with all the time. Um, but I know that in this moment, the podcast is something that I'm really passionate about. It's something that I really care about. What it really comes down to for me is, I guess more than the external validation, it's a need to be able to feel like I'm making a difference
Mm.
and connecting. It's all about connection for me. And I feel like at the moment, and maybe because it's also this expectation I have on myself that this needs to equal, the number of followers and the number of comments or the number of, um, you know, uh, reviews that we get in order to finally put that beast to bed. But in the early days, I guess that's maybe not realistic because we're just starting out. This is episode 4 and can't really expect that we are connecting with a lot of people. But I'd like to think that the people that we are connecting with are getting some value and that we might be helping them in some way. It's all about wanting to make a difference with other people, you know. That's what it's really about for me. Um,
Mm.
and at the moment, when it feels like there's not a lot of feedback, it's like, well, is it working? Are we making a difference? Am I making a difference?
Mm. Mm. I uh, are we making a difference? What do you think? Or how do you feel about? Do you feel like you're not making a difference, or you're making a difference, or?
I think it's twofold, you know. There is a sense of um having this idea and then seeing its potential in my mind and then the conversations that we were having were rich and meaningful. I was getting something out of them. I almost feel like, I was really valuing them.
Mm.
So I thought, wow, this would be an amazing opportunity to see if this could bring value to other people. So there's that side of it. But there's also the side I think that um is looking at the bigger picture in terms of, well, how much can we really impact here? Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you. I really hear you. And is it sort of like you are you feeling like you want results? You want to feel results, or like you want to have tangible data or something that makes you confirm that it's working. I'm sorry, I'm just guessing. I'm not trying to.
Yeah, I think like if I think about this experience I had when I was in school, um, I went to an all boys secondary school in Auckland, and the way that the school was set up was that you were put into categories in terms of your academic ability or whatever, right? And it ran on a scale from A being the top all the way down to I think was M or N. And the first couple of months, for some reason or another, I was placed into the D class, right? And right off the bat, I knew I was out of my depth. Like I knew I was. in a level where I was amongst other kids that were clearly had more academic ability than me. And not long into that, like a couple of months, I was relegated down out of that class and into, I think it was K or something like that. A lot, a lot further away from D. And I remember that feeling at that time. And there was a lot of stigma, a lot of talk around the school. People made fun of those people that were in those lower classes as being, like, I guess, a sense of, or less, or dumber, or less, maybe even less worthy. And I remember thinking to myself at that moment, oh, well, that's a bit of a disappointment. Maybe I must be a bit of a disappointment to my parents as well. And I start in D, and then all of a sudden I'm down and I'm in K. And I had other friends that were in lower classes, and I remember talking to them about it, and they were sort of feeling a bit the same, you know. We're being assessed or valued based on a scale system, and A is the kind of the creme of the crop, you know, the top of the scale. And it was kind of like, well, I need to get back to that again. How do I get higher?
Mm.
Rather than, I guess, a sense of what I would have liked to have seen as a more of a balanced system where everyone was valued and there wasn't it wasn't associated with a number or a letter. It was more like we all had something to offer, right? So on this topic of external validation, I think early on in my upbringing, that was a message that was coming loud and clear.
Mm.
Success or achievement or worth or value was linked to your place on the ladder.
Mm.
And if you weren't at the top or near to it, you might be exposed to a stereotypical kind of, oh, well, I remember they used to call those lower classes the dummy classes, the classes for the dummies. And I know some of the people that were in those classes, and some of those people, one of them in particular, has gone on to be very, very, very successful in his life. Successful in terms of what he would measure success, that he's followed something that he was good at. He found something that he was good at, and he's created an amazing business out of it. And he's helped a lot of people, and he's helped himself. And he was never, book smart, or I mean, I think he was in the one of the very lower classes, but he still has worth. He still has value. I mean, he still is showing up in this world with a lot to offer. And I remember talking to him about this later on, not later on in life, and it's just funny how from an early age we were getting these messages that if we weren't measuring up, if we weren't meeting a certain expectation, then we were not enough. So where I'm at with that today is as I start this new project, we start this new project together. Um, these things are coming up for me again. And I want to sit with this and say, well, why cannot we just show up in this world and be enough as we are without all the noise? And have you experienced something like that?
Mm.
And is there anyone out there that might be experiencing something similar in their everyday lives?
Hmm. What is the what letter do you think the podcast is at? Is it K, D?
Ah. Hmm.
Why not A?
Well, it's all perspective, isn't it? Today, as I show up with this frustration, who knows? But tomorrow, those noisy neighbors might not be so noisy, and there might be the other parts of me that feel more comfortable with wherever I'm at. So
Yeah,
while we're talking about external validation as a part of me, it's not all of me, yeah?
of course.
And it's not something that I want to define myself with. Um,
Which I,
an interesting metaphor is the noisy neighbor, because what do we do with the noisy neighbor, right? What do we do with anything that's uncomfortable in life? You know, we have we have different ways that we can approach this noisy neighbor situation, right? We have a neighbor that we don't like too much. We most of the time we just up and move, right? Get away from the problem. But who's to say that we don't move down the street and then we, for one reason or another, get another noisy neighbor, right?
yeah.
So
Well,
maybe there's another way of seeing it. It's like, well, maybe I just go next door to the noisy neighbor and get to know the noisy neighbor. Ask him or her or whatever for a cup of sugar.
yeah, and I think that that's exactly what you're doing. You just bring in the noisy neighbor to this conversation, which is a way of meeting him or her and bringing along and yeah and and live with him or her and being part of the ride.
Yeah.
Maybe having participation in all of this, it will be a little bit or kinder or less judgmental.
Mm.
Um, it, it is funny, Lloyd, when I was listening to you and I was trying to understand what's happening to me on that area as well. It's like I'm I also suffered that. I felt like I suffered that situation a lot, and I remember that trying to be a good student, trying to be a good whatever, a good this, a good that, a good that, finding a good appraisal, a good no, a good assessment, a good like everything, and sometimes I got that and didn't do
No.
anything. At that time, I thought it was, taking a photo with certificate of achieving something, or I was proud that I never had to do an extra exam at school, and I was in a very good school, or, and then nothing happened.
You mean
Yeah,
nothing changed
nothing,
for you?
nothing changed for my. It was again, it was an instant gratification.
Mm.
Was a sense of, oh, I belong to this, or I'm a good boy, I'm doing things right. But it still wasn't enough, and it still wasn't what moved me or what actually made me complete or whole. Um, and I have a different feeling about what we're doing today, and in this with this podcast, and it's not about comparison or or I I just had a completely whole sense of amazing achievement of what we're doing. I'm very, very proud of what we're doing.
Mm.
And as I comment to you before, I listen to this podcast as a listener. I'm a listener of this podcast, and also working with the neighbor, like listening to myself, my accent, my choice of words, my everything. But I invite the neighbor to listen it to me with me, and yeah, and go and stay with it. And then yeah, I start enjoying the process. And I start enjoying the process. And if nobody listens, and nobody listens, but you don't know that. We don't know that. Yes, there's analytics, there's data that you can check and all of that. But if there's one listener that got something, but also it's not about the listener, I got something. I'm extremely uh, proud of what we're doing just because we're doing it. I'm extremely proud of you that you're here on with all these considerations that you brought to the table very with a lot of courage.
Yeah, it does feel like that a little bit. It's not easy.
But if we put all of that for every single aspect of our life, at the end of the day, just like turning up like that with your neighbors, because sometimes it's not one. Sometimes there are many neighbors, and invite them along, and you turn up with them,
Mm.
and but the driver of all of this is beyond that.
Mm.
Well, we know what we're doing this,
Yeah.
and then there's noise. It's the name, yeah,
Mm.
why you are in that house with your family, and you know what you're doing. Then the neighbors are part of the landscape, all right?
Yeah, part of the landscape. Yeah.
Because you are the landscape of them.
Mm.
And then there is opportunities for that landscape to become something different, to
Mm.
interact with the landscape, and they getting something out of that. So every single interaction, because I'm pretty sure that when we knock at the door of the neighbors, we start understanding the neighbor and their stories.
Yeah.
And I'm making those neighbors a physical person, which is away from the metaphor of the neighbors in your head. But if we do that as well, and we put a person into our fantasy neighbors that tell us, well, we start understanding why the neighbor has those needs. And then we can be a little bit more kind to them. And then we're understanding, and then we are on the right with them or helping them.
Can you
Yeah.
say a little bit more about that getting to know them, being a bit more understanding of them? What do you mean by that?
You sort of explained to me that one of the neighbors that came up this morning, it was very linked to was with you when there was this system at school,
Yeah.
and then it started to make a little bit of more sense. to you, that you started to understand why probably this morning you felt like that, because the neighbor was just reminding you of those moments, right? And then when you were present on that, you started to relax because, well, I had this situation, and oh, okay. So it's conditioning, all right? It's what we've been conditioned through our stories and our life that makes us limit our freedom of things that we have chosen. And when I'm saying we, it's not Diego, it's the one behind me.
Mm.
And I need to show up here with Diego, or you need to show up with Lloyd, and Lloyd carries all these stories, same as me.
Mm.
So going up a couple of layers of conditioning, and okay, we're doing this because this is the raw initiative or the raw desire of doing this, and then all this conditioning starts coming, and then you need to show up with all of that every day to whatever you're doing.
Mm.
And that's hard, but the idea of showing up with everything that you're carrying is the courageous part of all of this, and that's why we're doing things. That's why we're showing up. That's why we're doing the podcast. And the capacity or the strength or the skill that you got, Lloyd, to bring your neighbor with already the definition of that is gold, because that's life. That's how we show up in life with all these conversations in our heads, but we do it anyway because we understand that those are only conversations in our head that bring feelings, and then but that's the meaning of this podcast, that we can actually show, and you can show to yourself and show to myself, that when you carry in those neighbors and you communicate about that, and we bring them to the conversation with all the vulnerability that requires to do that, it starts to clear because the neighbors start softening, all right?
Mm.
And at the end of the day, we start getting in contact with what was the initial initiative. Why are we doing this? Because we know that.
Mm.
When we do things, we know what we're doing it. We know it's just the noise that comes in the way, and it's very powerful. Those noises are sometimes very powerful. Sometimes those noises knock us out.
Yeah, sometimes they do. Yeah. Well, it feels like they do. Obviously, they don't physically, we don't get knocked down to the ground, but it feels heavy. Like even for me, showing up today with those feelings felt quite heavy. And like I said earlier on, there were other feelings associated with those feelings, like a little bit of shame, like, oh, I don't like this neighbor so much, it's a bit ugly. Like, what is this need for external validation? That's not me. I don't want this. Again, there's a judgment there, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And showing up in this environment and being vulnerable with that, yeah, it does take a lot of me. And what's important in that moment is to keep coming back to that why, what you were talking about, that the core of the essence of why I started this, why we started this in the first place. Yeah, it was born from an idea, but behind the idea there was a very clear intention.
hmm and everything that we're saying right now, it's linking us to the previous episode that I listened to yesterday about, starting the day with under in charge.
Yes, taking charge of the day. That's right. Yes.
And when you're not taking charge of the day, you're starting the day with all your neighbors, and they start coming. You're not controlling them,
Yeah.
or you're not giving them permission, because it's all about the space that you create in your brain, and for that, and then they come to you without permission. But when you allow them to come because you're in charge, that's fine. That's all right. It's a better way of dealing with them. That, and again, it's the I personally refer all of that to the morning practices. All right,
Mm.
it's a good way for me to deal with them, to deal with that situation. All right, of all the stories that come to us, and very valid stories, because we have every single we got every single excuse to have those stories, and we keep validating them, and we keep banging into them, and said, yep, this is adding stuff. Yeah, it is that, it's that. And if you don't have a conscious practice that releases a little bit of that tension, or that, um, or gives space to the story to show up as a story, not as a real thing. And then we see it, and suddenly, ooh, okay, it's a story, it's a nice story. And yeah, and but it's beautiful, Lloyd, because what this conversation is about and what we're doing is exactly that. And the purpose of this podcast, as we dream of, is that you show up to a mate with everything you got, and you share that.
Mm.
And then your mate will listen or not, but at least you're showing up with that. You're not saying, "Hey, Diego, how are you?" And I just love the podcast. Oh, another podcast. Oh, it's just an amazing moment. Oh, this is awesome. I'm loving it, and it's not true. But that's what we do all the time, and then you turn off the microphone, and then we turn off the camera and say, "Like, oh, God, that was hard." And it's very likely that next time you don't show up because you already found this one very inauthentic, and you don't show up
Mm.
because it's suffering. All the pretending is suffering. So if you don't pretend, there's an opportunity that this podcast will keep going.
Mm.
Then
Mm. No, that's great. That's great insight in there, Diego. And I was really resonating with a lot of what you were saying around, you know, this process and how we show up with whatever from week to week, and not leaving it behind and only coming with the glossy stuff.
I
We
and,
show up with the imperfection.
yes,
It's a in a kind of a Kiwi saying. I don't know if it's a Kiwi saying, but a warts and all approach. Like on the days where we don't feel our best, we can often still show up and give a part of ourselves that's worth something. And this kind of, in a way, ties back to what I was saying before around this experience I had growing up in the New Zealand school system, in a grammar school of all boys, that, you know, we're all worth something. I would have loved to have heard that then, but there wasn't that sense then. It was like you're all in categories here. And it feels very much like survival of the fittest.
Mhm.
This is where you need to be, where you need to go to succeed in life. And here's the point, and it was very clearly defined, A, as being not only the top students, but the top sports people, the all-rounders, and then there was the rest. And that also kind of, in a way, determined your position in society, in the school society, but we all worth something, right?
Of course.
Even our imperfections are worth something. So,
Mm.
yeah, showing up is about showing up with whatever's there, no?
That's a wrap on this episode of What No One Told Us. If you got something out of it, hit subscribe. And remember to share it with someone you care about. We've got more real conversations coming your way. So stay tuned and remember to be kind to yourself.